Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. You are on the Steady Coach, and it is such a pleasure to bring you this conversation with Kristin Townsend. This is part one of this interview because Kristin is both a therapist herself, which she will share more about in part two, and someone who herself has a success story in dealing with chronic dizziness. You're going to hear all about Kristin's symptoms in this interview, but it's good for you to know that not only was Kristin diagnosed with PPPD, she was also diagnosed with Meniere's disease as well. So for those of you on my channel who have that diagnosis or whose doctors have given you this diagnosis, I think hearing what Kristin has to say about it is going to make you feel so much better and give you so much hope for the future. Kristin has so much great insight, not only because of her own experience, but also because of her professional experience. I know you're going to learn a lot from this interview. Please enjoy. And of course, I look forward to questions and comments. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to this as a podcast, please consider heading over to YouTube to leave me some comments. I love hearing what you think about what we're talking about. And as always, please like, share, subscribe to the channel, or follow the podcast. All of these things help me reach more people. And stay tuned, of course, for part two, in which Kristin will share her expertise in somatic therapy. Enjoy. Kristin, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Yes, me too. And I was just saying off air that this is the most serendipitous timing ever because I just had someone in my coaching group like yesterday say, I'm dealing with these symptoms and this is what my doctor is saying. And this means I'm never going to recover. And this means I have Meniere's disease. And it's, it's an awful diagnosis to receive. And I was telling her, I'm literally talking to someone tomorrow who's gone through this and gotten better. So sit tight. So this is going out to her and to anyone else in that position.
Yeah, it is a really scary diagnosis to get. And I think at the time that I received it, I did feel like, wow, this is going to be my life forever. So I am happy to explore that and talk about it with you so that people know that it doesn't have to be forever. And there's ways to manage symptoms and to fully recover.
Wonderful. Okay. So for everyone to know, this is going to be a two-part interview. So today in part one, we're going to be talking about your experience with chronic dizziness. And then in part two, we're going to be talking about your professional specialty. So did you want to just say a word about that so people know what to expect in the second part of the interview, what we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, I'm a licensed therapist, and my approach is very holistic and somatic. So I integrate traditional talk therapy with somatic techniques and also integrate wellness. So I think about nutrition and lifestyle and things like yoga and nervous system regulation and looking at how the body impacts the mind and the other way around. So it's very interwoven and integrated in traditional therapy with lots of wellness techniques.
Wonderful. I cannot wait to hear about this. And I'm especially excited to hear about the somatic focus because I think I've referenced this a lot on my channel, but I don't think I've ever interviewed a therapist who uses really somatic modalities. So I'm excited to dig into that. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. Okay, so let's back way up and start with your story. And maybe you could give us some context on who you are and who you were, what was going on in your life when all this got started.
Yeah. I think previous to the diagnosis, I lived relatively typically and was active and had my own wellness practices and was practicing therapy. And at the time that I started experiencing dizziness, I was going through a great deal of stress. I was going through a divorce. I was starting a business. It was peak pandemic. And all of the things that come along with that. So when I think about it, I think about the stress that I was experiencing in my physical body, but also the context in which that stress was existing. Right. So separating from a partner was a major support, and then not having support systems because COVID was happening and we had to stay separated. So I think that the stress that I was experiencing systemically and then also internally was just so much for my body. And that's really why I was drawn to your channel and drawn to you, was looking at how stress impacts these chronic conditions.
Mm,
And so I don't think initially I knew that. So this is really me like looking back on my experience. At the time, I was desperately seeking answers for what was happening, because it's such a physical and somatic experience that I was like,
debilitating.
yeah, is it my ears? Is it my brain? Do I have a tumor? Is this something, bigger? So as I'm talking about this, I'm talking about this with like 2 years of knowledge on top of it. And I'm able to look back and say, yes, 100%, those really stressful and emotional experiences that were happening in my life, and being kind of uh, taken out of all of my comforts, really contributed to what was happening with me at the time.
Yes. Such great insights, obviously. But I don't think it's an accident that so many people follow your timeline of, I mean, having had symptoms starting around the time of the pandemic. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, that was not the only source of stress, and it's never been the only source of stress in people's lives. It's just, as you say, I like to talk about it as a stress bucket. Like, there are lots of things that impact you and your nervous system regulation, but when your bucket's already up to here and then we pour in a little bit more, that can make people go just to that alarm state or that threat state. So it sounds like you have a really clear sense of what that was like for you at the time. And when was this period of time? Like year, month?
Fall of 2021, I believe.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
about a couple of years ago.
Okay. So would you mind sharing how the symptoms got started? Like what happened? What was your
It's
experience?
actually really difficult for me to identify like an exact start time, because there was so much going on in my life. Um, but yeah, there was a okay, I do remember. It started with tinnitus. And so I started experiencing ringing in my ears, and it felt so intense. I was like, wow, what is this? Like, it feels so abnormal when something like that starts happening to you. So I went to urgent care just to kind of check to see if I had an ear infection or something was going on. Checked my ears and said that no, like, your ears look fine. Also, it would be difficult for someone to say because they can't really see like fully inside of your middle and inner ear or anything like that. No, look, ears look fine. Everything checks out good. But so sent me home, and then the symptoms increased from there into dizziness. Um, I think that was about like within a week. I just noticed that I was having some dizziness, and then the dizziness wasn't going away. And obviously, at that point, my fear response was activated. I was like, what is happening in my body right now? I felt, and obviously within the context of feeling out of control in other areas of my life,
Totally.
losing physical control, and in a place where like it's really such an intense sensory experience. It's not like, oh, my finger hurts. It's like your entire perceptive experience is off. The entire way that you're taking in the world changes. And so that was a really scary thing to feel, and to feel it for more than a couple of minutes, right? Because dizziness is usually an alarm bell that like something is wrong inside of your body. And so I wasn't able to get in touch with my PCP, or I didn't have one at the time. So I ended up just going to the emergency room, like, hey, I have ear ringing. I'm noticing these headaches. I'm having dizziness that isn't going away. And then had a similar, well, this particular doctor, and I think doctors are trained to have answers, even if they don't exactly know what's going on. So he goes, nah, you have fluid in your ear. We're going to put you on, I can't think of the name. It's of what exactly the drug was, but basically like to clear me out, and it was a stimulant, and put me on that, and put me on the highest dose of that at the time, which actually ended up just exacerbating my symptoms because I didn't have fluid in my ears. It was neurological and nervous system based and all these sorts of things that I know now. So yeah, I was continuing to have the dizziness. The drugs were making the dizziness significantly worse. It wasn't going away. My stress was going up. I was feeling more and more fear as the time was going on, and this was not going away. I went to my ENT to try to figure out, oh, well, there's something going on, with my ears. And she ended up saying, well, stop taking that medication. He put you on way too much in the first place. I'm like hypersensitive to medication too. So I think I was having more and more symptoms of like anxiety and just like intense, side effects from the medication, which was making it, again, scarier. And she puts me on a steroid. Again, I think like the medical model is there's something wrong. Let's zap it. Let's get it out. And so that was really what was happening, was like no one could identify the problem, but there was a problem and we're going to knock it out. I think was the approach. And at that point, I even though I was already a holistic practitioner, and believed in those methodologies, I think at the time I was so afraid and also believed that there's probably something wrong with my ears that I was, going along with this version of the story. So took steroids, also had terrible side effects, again, because there's nothing that they need to zap in my ears. So the medication isn't working for what it needs to. It's just kind of like creating more stress in my body, and I'm having side effects to the medication. And after that, I think I went back to the ENT. Nothing's going, nothing's changing. Got an MRI. Nothing's wrong. There's nothing happening. At this point, I'm getting poked and prodded every direction you can think of: blood work and MRIs and CT scans and checking my ears and checking my everything, and nothing was wrong.
Did you have vestibular testing done? Did they send you like for the like caloric testing or VNG testing where they checked your eye movements or anything like that?
Eventually, but that took about 4 months for someone to finally send me to a vestibular specialist. And that was actually the first person who did, the goggle test and was checking my eye movement and checking like for any sort of like crystal problems in my ears. And he was the first person who said, I think you have triple PD. And at that point, I would say that was the beginning of my actual treatment. But it took maybe even 5 months at that point to get to the right person who said, no, I don't believe that there's anything wrong with your ears. I don't believe there's anything wrong with your eyes. I think that this is like, this neurological condition, and here's how it works. And give me some psychoeducation, and also talk to me a little bit about how it was connected with cognitive behavioral therapy and like how that could be helpful, just changing your relationship with the dizziness. And at that point, a different part of my brain turned on, which was like my holistic therapy brain. I was like, oh, if that's what it is, I'm shifting everything. I'm shifting my entire approach to this. And that's really when my treatment began, was when we stopped treating it like something wrong with my ears in particular, and something that was happening with psychologically with my relationship to the dizziness in my body. And also, I don't know the ins and outs of like what causes triple PD or like how that really works. But knowing that essentially you get stuck in a loop, and that you have to essentially break that cycle. Once I understood that, I was able to go and see a neurologist who was connected with that particular physical therapist. And they actually own a place called the Neurology, Psychiatry, and Balance Center. And so they are very integrative. And I felt very lucky that I was able to see them.
Where are they located?
They're located in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And so they integrate, psychiatry, balance and physical therapy with neurology. And I genuinely just feel very lucky to have been sent there and to have found people who look at it in a way that actually was helpful. And so I would say then I started doing some physical therapy. The habituation exercises were really helpful. But I would say my relationship to the chronic condition and to myself was what was most helpful. Beginning to approach it with a lot more compassion and understanding and softness, and understanding that the anxiety and fear responses to what was happening were contributing to the maintenance of the experience. Because when I was really sick and believed that there was either a tumor or something horrible happening in my ears and that I was going to lose my hearing forever, my life also became very isolated. I laid in bed all day. I saw my clients. I went to bed. I laid down because I believed that, the way that you are taught to treat an illness is with like rest or hydration and those sorts of things, not realizing again that the more I isolated, the more I laid down, and the more I actually wasn't habituating my head movements and my eye movements to the world, kind of exercising those things back into health. I was keeping the condition in place.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Yeah.
was a whirlwind, really.
Physically and yes, and figuratively. Yes, a whirlwind.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
even wonder as I talk about it if I'm being cohesive, because at the time it was just so much information coming in, so much of my time was dedicated. I mean, really, it almost felt like a full-time job.
Right.
On top of what I already did for work, which is also very emotional and sometimes can be stressful. Trying to move through this, it was so much. It was so much energy expenditure on trying to figure out what was going on.
Sure. Wow. Okay, so let's pick up some of the details that I know people are going to really want to know. So,
Yeah.
You mentioned losing your hearing, and I know you told me off air that you actually did lose your hearing a couple times during
Oh,
this process.
yes.
So
I
what
missed that
yeah,
part of the
when
story.
well, so actually, maybe let's start with the dizziness symptoms that you had, and then maybe you
Yeah,
can tell me about the hearing components as well.
sure. Um, the dizziness experience that I had happened for about a year actually before I lost my hearing. So this triple PD experience was happening for a year before I actually was having any Meniere's type symptoms.
Okay.
And so the story that I was just sharing was actually more triple PD related, me trying to figure all of those things out. And it was majority, I would say, ear ringing, pressure, dizziness. And most of the time, the dizziness was evoked by quickly standing up, taking walks, being outside in open areas. And I tended to feel better indoors or resting again, which is why I believed I was doing the right thing by doing those things.
Right.
And
Any
actually,
visual symptoms?
yeah, I would say in general, just not spinning, but difficulty focusing. Sometimes there would be periods of time where things was having some vertigo symptoms, things appeared to be moving, or I would say especially if I was in stimulating environments, like a busy city, or even like, I like to go for hikes sometimes, like if there was just like lots of trees around, sometimes like, because your eyes are moving back and forth, taking in everything. I would get really dizzy in those environments as well. Yeah, just it almost felt, it's such a difficult thing to describe because it's not the same thing as spinning in a circle and feeling dizzy. It's so different. Everything feels a little far away and almost like you're not fully in touch with reality, like the way that your brain is perceiving the physical world. You feel very separate from it almost in a way. And it's a very strange thing to try to describe to people, because I think when they think dizziness, they think, dizzy bat or something like that. And it is a lot more visual, the things that I was feeling at the time.
Did you get relief when you were still? If you were to like close your eyes and be still, would that give you relief, or did you still have residual symptoms even then?
I would say that I chronically and perpetually had symptoms at a lower level all the time. And
Mhm.
if I stood up and was moving and doing things, then it would
It was worse.
exacerbate.
Good to
Mhm.
good to know because I get questions a lot. But my symptoms are 24/7. Does this apply to me? Yes, this applies.
Yes.
Yes, most people have 24/7 symptoms,
Oh, yeah, all
initially,
the time.
especially. Yeah.
And it was insane to try to describe that to people because, you know, I'd imagine a lot of your viewers feel isolated. I can relate to that because you try to explain your experience to people and they don't quite understand, and it's not something that you can see. And so even when I did start to improve and go out and see people, people would forget or not realize. And I'm like, no, I'm dizzy all the time. I'm dizzy right now as I'm talking to you. I'm dizzy all the time, all day long, every single day for years.
Mm.
And it's so not only is the experience really scary, but it also, you feel unseen, and like it's such a rare thing to experience. It's difficult to relate to anybody about it, which is again why I'm so grateful that you are creating this community. Um, and so actually the Meniere symptoms, to kind of move into that, um, started after was in recovery, and I felt as though I was improving. So it actually was very weird for me to have this backslide after I believed I'm getting so much better. And I really, truly was. So I would say for about 6 months, I was on a good, you know, um, consistent level of improvement. And it was when I started like going out again and socializing again, I think my body almost was like, whoa, what are you doing? Like it was getting re-triggered, or maybe even, if you think about nervous system states, like if you are starting to improve and you're starting to get better, like part of that is part of the recovery, at least for me, was challenging myself to like do things that I had stopped doing. But at that same time, you are actively triggering the symptoms. And so I'm not exactly sure what shifted or what changed. The only thing I know for sure is that I started challenging myself more to go out and to do new things. Maybe that was like too much for my body all at once. Or, I really don't know. But there was a day where my ringing in my right ear started just blaring. Never ever had experienced it quite like that. There maybe had been some moments where it would like go up and then down and back out again. And then I have like this kind of chronic hush that happens in my ears, but I
There's
never
like a
experienced
low pitch, like a shh sound?
chronically, yes. But what
Mhm,
I
mhm,
experienced was a loud, high pitched ringing, and it was
mhm,
blaring and it was not going away.
mhm,
And then the vertigo started. So not the kind of spatial dizziness that I was experiencing before, but truly vertigo, room spinning, my entire world was spinning around me, vertigo. That was a new experience of
mhm.
dizziness that I had not had yet. And then my hearing went out. For about 6 hours was the entire episode. So I was having vertigo symptoms
Oh,
and complete
Kristin.
hearing loss in I
Oh.
know, in my right ear. And I'm a musician too, so that was like additionally scary for me. I'm like, what's happening? What's about to happen to me? And what was, I think, even more difficult was that I reverted back to that fear space where I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening again. Here we go again. What am I, I'm going to have to start all the way over. And all of those kind of negative thoughts that come up when you feel really trapped and like nothing's ever going to get better. I was like, and it's really devastating when you start to make progress and then have a backslide, which is actually part of the progress. I want to like tell everyone that if you regress, that's part of the healing process, and like it's going to be okay. Um, but when you have those backslides, it's really devastating. So that happened 3 times where I had episodes like that.
Mm.
And again, the doctors, I would say they don't really know a lot about this stuff. I'm like, where does Meniere's come from? They're like, we don't know. And I'm like, so what's happening? They're like, it might be fluid in your ear. I'm like, so what do we do? They're like, don't eat salts. I'm like, okay, that's
Right,
it.
right,
Like, what
right,
do
right.
So I just like wait and cross my fingers and hope. And I mean, kind of, yeah, that they don't really have more to offer you. They're like, well, if it gets worse, then there's more steps we could take for, but really the treatment is, they don't seem to really fully understand or know what's happening and how to treat it. The way that they look at it is, this is a chronic condition, you're going to have it. Some people burn out, right? So it gets better or it goes away, and they can't describe that. And some people have it forever in different, in varying degrees. Some people have one episode a year, some people have 3 episodes, some people have it every single day for months, and then it gets better. And so it really presents so differently with every person. My experience of it was 3 episodes over the course of about a month, and then I have not experienced that again.
Wow. Oh, yeah. And it's Meniere's is a thorny subject because, as you say, I think the reason we see such differences in presentations is because I think they probably have different causes. I think for a lot of people with Meniere's like symptoms, we're dealing with like almost entirely a neural circuit issue, and the neural circuit issues can result in temporary physiologic problems. They can result in temporary nerve issues or inner ear issues that aren't necessarily pathology. It's not necessarily like damage. It's just it's a malfunction, right? It's a temporary
Right.
malfunction. And then for other people, there's probably like an ongoing, maybe again, this is just conjecture that we have in the vestibular world, but there's an ongoing disease process for some people that may be autoimmune or something else.
Right.
We don't really know, but I suspect that all of these things are mediated by the same things that mediate neural circuit dizziness. And I also
Sure.
suspect that a very large number of people with these kinds of symptoms are dealing with a neural circuit issue,
Mm-hmm.
not a permanent disease process type issue,
I
especially
agree.
in the early stages, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
I agree. And once I started thinking of it that way,
mhm.
things really started improving. And I think that something that you're saying that sticks out to me is, almost regardless of the cause, you can still treat the symptoms and treat what's happening with the same approach. So whether
Yes.
it's related to a circuitry issue or it's related to an autoimmune disease, reducing stress is good for your body, period.
Right.
And having a more compassionate approach and looking at wellness techniques and holistic modalities all are really helpful regardless of the cause, and you can heal even if you're never really fully able to pinpoint an exact
Which one it
reason
was.
that this happened.
Very well said. Very well said. In other words, you really don't have anything to lose. I mean,
Right.
we're not we're not saying go out and buy really expensive stuff or, do risky procedures. We're saying be nice to yourself and treat your body well. I mean, so you don't really have anything to lose with those things. So, can you tell us then so after you had these episodes,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like you quickly oriented to the idea that this was neural circuit mediated, that this had something to do also with kind of this ongoing process for you. So, what did you do to get better?
Wow, that's a big question because I think there were so many things um, that I did to get better. I think for me, and this might not apply to everybody, I stopped desperately seeking answers. Um, Almost as, and for me, that was like part of a process of like letting go and trusting my body to heal and
Mm.
to stop responding with so much fear and anxiety to everything. Because when you are really hyper focused on finding an answer, everything feels really scary through that filtration system. Because if you think about looking at, it's like negativity bias, right? So like if you see there's a white wall and there's one black dot on it, you're going to really hyper focus on that one black dot that's on the wall. And so if that's your focus, you're essentially only filtering in the problems and the scary things that are happening in your body if you're always fixated on trying to figure out what the problem is. And so for me, anytime something twitched or turned or changed, I was like, "Ooh, what's that? What's that? What's that? What is that?" And that hyperfixation on trying to target the problem ended up kind of, again, like kind of perpetuating this loop where I was only narrowing and tunneling in on the difficult parts of my experiences or the uncomfortable parts of my body. And I wasn't able to look at myself more holistically and tap into maybe some more safety within my body because I was only fixating on the parts that were uncomfortable, problematic. And so for me, I already had a daily yoga practice before all of this happened. So I'm really grateful that I had that foundation and that structure to rely on. And I started doing softer practices, and I think we'll get more into this in part 2.
I was just about to ask, how do you find safety when you have all this fixation on non-safety? I am very excited to talk about that in part 2.
Yeah. I started doing specifically yin yoga, which is static holding of poses. So long held poses for like 3 to 10 minutes. And it's a lot more meditative and your body's opening in a very particular way. And it's a really safe way to start to let go, allow everything in your body to physically relax. But then also, if you're dizzy and you're laying down and your eyes are closed and you're able to kind of not take in all of the perceptivity issues that are happening, you're able to maybe like focus on your breath, or that my feet feel really good, or my arms feel really good, or my body actually feels really neutral. And all of these other areas from here down that I'm not really paying attention to, and refinding safety within your physical body. And I think too, when you're experiencing so much fear in relationship to your body, being able to open it in such a gentle way and connect with it in such a gentle way is really, really important to learn that this is actually a place where I can find safety again. And so there's very particularly like yin yoga and restorative practices are really helpful for that, because power yoga might be more focused on like, it's more performative, or it's more on the posture, or it's more about exercise and all of the other things that get integrated into like a more modern yoga practice. But yin and restorative is more of a gentle, meditative form of connecting with your body. And when people experience trauma, and I would call this a trauma.
Absolutely. Yes.
And not just the things that maybe the traumatic things that led to this, but also the experience itself is incredibly traumatic. And what happens with people who experience trauma is they really disconnect from their physical bodies, or again, are like stuck in this loop of discomfort in their physical body, whether it be like heart rate being high, tightness, shallow breath, always feeling discomfort and dysregulation, nervous system dysregulation in your body. One, doing something like yoga, yin or restorative in particular, brings you into that parasympathetic or rest and digest state just within itself. But then also, if you do a gentle guided meditative practice of lovingly connecting with your body and learning how to find safety in your body again, that's a really, really powerful thing after something as specific as chronic illness has really made you feel just unsafe in your home. Yeah, because, again, talking about the lack of safety in the context in the world that I was in at that time, with pandemic and loss of partnership and starting a new business and just like everything being new and scary. Also, like the place where you are, you would hope that you'd be able to ground into at the end of the day also feels
not
unsafe.
safe. Yeah.
And so starting from that place, laying on the floor and just softly connecting with myself and feeling the parts of my body that maybe felt good or again, neutral, and just learning how to gently breathe and bring safety into my body. And I remember those experiences being so emotional and not even provoked by some sort of emotional thought. Truly, my physical body letting go, letting the muscles elongate, and the fascia and all of the sorts of things that start to open when you're in those postures was just a very baseline somatic release that I don't think I could quite explain, but my body was letting go of something. My nervous system was moving back into that softer, rested, safe place. And I think that relief was really where probably the tears and the relief were coming from, was like, oh gosh, like just being able to let go of all of that and feel soft again was really powerful. And so I really relied on yin practices and guided meditations, again, to learn how do I find safety in my body. And even beyond that, I would say compassion for my body. I was really mad at it. We did not have a good relationship anymore. I was frustrated. Why can't you be normal? Why can't I do this thing? And I had all this anger and resentment towards what was happening. And that really just fractured my relationship with myself and disconnected me even more from being able to heal, because as I would never, I mean, I know this is something that therapists and holistic practitioners say a lot, which is like, I would never speak to someone that I loved that way. Oh, like, you're not doing enough. I can't believe you're not doing this. Like, how could you do this to me? And like being really just harsh and critical, and that just kept more distance between me and myself and the things that I needed to feel safe and like loved and connected again. And so guided meditations and yin practice in particular helped me to go, okay, even if I'm having a bad day meaning really, really dizzy that day, maybe really fatigued, very brain fogged, difficulty focusing, instead of having a frustrated and angry response to it, I was saying, I love you today. How do I start from where I am today? That really changed everything for me, where I could be like, this is where you are today. And I'm accepting that and moving from that place. So today, maybe I go slower. Today, maybe I do more of or less of this. And I think that yoga practices and meditative practices really help you to shift your relationship to yourself, as well as all of the kind of things that maybe science is working on describing in yoga and meditation, figuring out all the physiological things that are happening in the body.
But it's relational. It's a relational change. And that's, people who are listening should hear this as a theme now on my channel in the interviews, because when we really get to the heart of it, no matter what type of therapist I'm talking to, no matter what kind of modality he or she is using, what we're really targeting is the relationship with yourself and your body. Like, and if that's it, to me, that's like, that's safety. That's how you create safety, because you are with yourself 100% of the time. So if the external stresses are going to come and go, but if you treat yourself like a jerk and you're with yourself all the time, then you're not going to feel safe. And
Nope.
your nervous system's not going to be able to get out of this loop. So yeah, point very well made on that. Yeah. So how did you maintain outcome independence? So one of the concepts I think that's hardest for people, they'll be like, okay, so I'm gonna do this yin yoga practice. I'm gonna do this meditation, and then I'm gonna feel better. And then of course they're just constantly thinking about like why it's not making them feel better, and they're getting more. So how did you just let go and trust your body? That I feel like that's hard. That's really hard for people.
Yeah. And I think we live in a world where like productivity and outcomes are very important.
Exactly.
And so we approach our body and our health the same way. And our medical system approaches our health the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's the messaging that we're getting. And yeah, I think it's more, I guess this is kind of simplistic, but it's about staying present more than it is, again, like, even if you do something like yin and you do meditation and you approach it with the mindset that I have a problem, this thing is going to fix my problem, you're still approaching it with the same mindset versus approaching it with like acceptance and love and allowance for whatever experience you're having in that particular moment. Again, because then you're fixated on, that's still coming from the mindset that I am broken and there's something wrong with me and I'm not happy with this situation, which of course none of us are happy with this situation, but it's still not as gentle as it could be versus like really practicing presence and mindfulness from moment to moment to moment about how you're feeling and where you are and what's happening in your body in that moment and how to be soft and nurturing towards it in that moment. So I think that really was what helped me most. Instead of having a particular due date where I was going to be better or an outcome that I was expecting for myself, that still treated me like a project and like something that was broken versus this is how I feel right now. This is how I feel today. Where do I move from this place? And I'm accepting that, this might continue to happen for me. This might be on and off for me. It might get better. It might not get better. And if I focused on the outcome, whether or not I was going to get better, that felt really discouraging. I remember the first time I watched someone speak about their triple PD, and I think this probably, it was a success story, but it still made me very sad because I was at the very beginning of my journey when I had first gotten the diagnosis of triple PD. And so again, was like desperately, triple PD, what is this? I heard someone say that they recovered after 3 years. And when I heard 3 years,
yes,
I lost it. I was devastated because I was like, 3 years. I couldn't believe it. And then I was reading the comments and they were making it worse. They were like, I've had it for 7 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, oh no.
I know.
And
Yeah.
so I think that when I was focused on how long is this going to be for, again, it keeps you trapped in that fear versus, again, just mindfulness, presence, moment to moment, some acceptance, self-compassion. And by that, I don't mean complacency.
Right. You're not
I
just saying,
mean,
oh, this is just the way it's going to be. Fine. Like I
right.
give in. Yeah. Or I give up. Yeah.
Yeah. You still take action, but it's gentle action and it's loving action. And again, kind of like with the mindset of how would I treat someone I love, you don't, you find kind of, and this is a concept in yin, which is called finding your edge. So when you're moving into a stretch, you find just the point where you feel a little discomfort, but not pain. And you're not so far back that you don't feel anything at all. You reach your edge and then you soften into it and you let go. And the way your body opens up is just so beautiful from that point. You might, if you're in a forward fold, for example, you might be at a 45-degree angle and then find yourself, you find your edge and you just let go and you breathe and you're not actually thinking about pushing forward. You're allowing your body to open with just breathing and staying in that space. You'll find you kind of open your eyes when you're ready to come out of the pose and you're significantly further down than you were when you found your edge. And so I think there's something to that same concept as you approach this, which is, again, you're not staying so far back that you're not feeling anything at all. You're not challenging yourself whatsoever, but you find that point where you're just at the edge of your comfort and you breathe there and you soften there. And, I think that's just like such a much more nurturing way to look at progress. And again, with presence.
Yes. And this is a practice too. I want to drive that point home. And you can tell me, of course, if you disagree or have anything to add. But to me, people are like, oh man, I can only practice acceptance while I'm in this meditative state, but then I get really frustrated and fearful when I go out for a walk. That's okay. You're practicing. This is something that your nervous system is learning. So it's you're not going to be a Buddhist monk 24 hours a day. You're
Right.
not, right? So just wanted to run that by you and see if you had anything additional to add or if you disagree.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was and again, I'm saying this much later down the line
Right. In the
with
moment,
the
it's hard. Yeah.
perspective where I'm feeling better and I have the insight
Mhm.
versus in the moment. No, and that practice was actually really hard, because you want to feel better and it's so uncomfortable to be in that space. So yeah, it is something that it's a skill that you practice over time, just like anything else. No one would expect to pick up a guitar and just be able to play it. It's the same thing, and we expect these things of our bodies, though, or our nervous system. And so I think that, yeah, that's exactly right. It's something that you're learning and that you're going to get better at over time. um, Even if it's harder because you think of a skill as something very tactile. This is like very conceptual and abstract, and you don't get to see the results right away. And that is really uncomfortable, I think, for people. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. That's what all of this is about, too. How uncomfortable uncertainty is, not having answers. And so learning how to be soft despite uncertainty is so much of it. And so, yeah, that skill, it's not a skill you can hold or measure. And so it makes it much harder to believe that it's building, over time, but it does, and it
It
will.
does.
And it happens slowly, not all at once. And I certainly had lots of moments where I responded with fear, even though I had understood it differently. I would say even I had like a medical issue a few months ago that re-triggered some of my symptoms, and I responded to that with fear. And then I remembered, oh wait, don't do that, because it's so natural to be afraid of something scary.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. So how are you feeling nowadays then?
I feel significantly better. I would not say I'm 100% recovered, but my symptoms are not all day long, every day, the way that they were before. I would say that they're evoked more by like new situations. So like I went to, I'm, I live in Philly. I went to New York City, which was just like really overstimulating.
An
And
assault on the senses, yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so even though I'm from a city, like that city was like really overwhelming for me. And so in that environment, that triggered my dizziness, and I needed to go sit down, and I sat somewhere quiet and soft for a little while and felt better. So it does still happen sometimes, but it's happening less and less severely over time.
Yes, wonderful. Yeah, so I never know how people come to answers like this, but if you had to put a percentage on there, again, I don't even know how you would define 90% or 80%, but if you had to, what would you say, like, in terms of how you felt beforehand and how you feel now? How close are you to that mark?
I would say 90%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful.
I feel it's been 2 years, 2.5 years.
Mhm,
Um, and yeah, I would say about 90%.
mhm,
And it's getting better all the time. Even like little things. I used to always have to take a nap in the middle of the day because my brain was taking in so much all the time.
mhm.
Now I don't have to. I can feel that my brain fog is better, or storms used to trigger my symptoms. Now storms don't trigger my symptoms. All those like kind of little things, I'm starting
Mhm.
to notice improvements.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And for people to hear who freaked out about the 2.5 years, it hasn't been 2.5 years of hell for you. It sounds like
No.
I mean, I'm not downplaying what you went through, but it sounds like once you got on track, yes, you've had setbacks because those are part of the territory, but it sounds like it's been, if we were to look at the graph, it might look like this, but you haven't been living a horrible life without friends and without being able to work and without being able to drive in this time.
Nope. No,
Yeah.
definitely no. I would say that probably, yeah, about like 4 to 6 months once I started seeing the correct people, mostly my physical therapist, who diagnosed me with the triple PD and like sent me to a neurologist who was
Mhm.
just amazing and so lovely, and really, really helpful, and also had a more holistic approach, which I was grateful for. I was like, I went in and told her, I'm not taking any more medication. We're not doing that. So after I met with them, yeah, I would say that life started to resume to normal. Gradually over time, I gained more and more strength to be able to be out for longer, do more things. But yeah, I would say for the only 6 months of like being in bed, being inside, being really afraid, not knowing what was going on, not even standing up was really scary because it would trigger symptoms, those sorts of things. But since then, so 2.5 years, I would say that it's been like maybe last year, most of last year, I was like at 80% and still living my life fully. I think that's part of it too, is like, even though I'm still a little dizzy, I really want to make sure that I still do all the things that I want to do, because once you learn, it's actually not something that's hurting you. You know, you allow yourself to do more and more. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Wonderful. And maybe we'll check in again in a year. I've actually so next week we're interviewing Vivian, who was on my channel a year ago, and she's fully recovered now. So back when I interviewed her, she was around 90% or whatever, and she's now completely recovered. And when we were corresponding by email, she's like, wow, I haven't thought about this stuff in so long. It's so interesting to revisit it. And I'm thinking that's really how you know, right? I'm not even thinking
Yep.
about this stuff anymore. So
Yeah.
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 So, well, this has been wonderful. And I think you've already jumped into some of the tools that
Sure.
you use that I think that people are going to want to hear about. So let's stop here. Invite all of you to leave questions and comments below. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this as a podcast, please consider hopping over to YouTube, because we have a very active comment section and it's fun to discuss all the things we talk about. As always, if you could like the video, share the video, subscribe to my channel, follow the podcast, all of these things help me reach more people. And Kristin and I will be back with part 2, in which we will be talking about somatic therapy and yin yoga for chronic dizziness recovery. So stay tuned for that. And Kristin, thank you so, so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.